Greetings and welcome to the channel. This is Ron from Tarot of the Twin Sun. Tarot of the Twin Sun is a functional division within the Order of the Twin Sun. Please take only what you will. This is a reading for the energy and the composition, the constitution of the 8th house. That is the energy of Scorpio. And this is for the date of October 1st, 2022 at 10:40 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So we'll go ahead and get started with a particular inquest into the energy and the drive and the motivation of transformation that occurs on the ascendant that is placed here, at least for the time being, on the 1st. So when it comes to this, there is something of a subtle realization that comes through the subtle body as well as the emotional drive that is tied to the auric field of Scorpio. And this occurs in the 1st house, conjunct the South Node, meaning that with this energy there is potentially a great drive and a great demeanor that is tied to past karmas as well, something that has to do with the drives and the sort of alchemy that occurs through the South Node and the heavily affected and impacted karmas of the past. This is a very deep spiritual placement that actually it physically manifests in terms of your own health as well as the subtle field of your body. How that emanates is really up to the coloration of your own particular South Node and how many house placements that is away from your own particular chart. But with all this, there is the intention of trying to sublimate the material realm, something that we are trying to manifest in terms of the North Node, that is Rahu's placement in Taurus, and that actually aspects something of relationships that are intended to be committed to, and these being sort of in question in terms of their karmic influence or the sort of shadow that is trailed within that connection. This has to do also with the ability to understand how these relationships are designed in order to understand how they're disorderly in some sort of way. And by disorder, I mean psychological disorder, or perhaps even disorder in terms of the commitments that are designed in order to sustain some sort of promise or some sort of keep. Okay. Now, with the primary ruler of Scorpio in the 8th house, Mars in the 8th house, that is right here in the energy of Gemini, there's an ability to somewhat import a gateway. The door of Gemini opens, and this allows for deep transformation in one way or another. Usually it has to do with two options, at least, that are somewhat, they come out of multiplicity, okay, and that's the mystery of Gemini. It has to do with not just one hand, but the second as well, the left hand versus the right hand path. And with this, there's an ability for deep transformation as well as healing through a conjunction with vertex, Mars in the 8th house, okay? And this somewhat squares up an interesting thing here in that the 1st house, 2nd house cusp as well, 3rd house, 4th house rather. So it's the 1st, 4th, 8th, and 10th that create an interesting dynamo in terms of the square that opens up the month of October in terms of trying to understand your own self in terms of how it represents or reflects the inner world that you may be trying to drone up or conjure up, how this inner world is actually in conflict with some of the more deeper transformations that you may be actively seeking out as a student or as someone who deals with friends or friend circles that are in need of your assistance, your healing in some way, shape, or form. At the same time, it addresses karmas of the 10th house, karmas in retrograde in the energy of Virgo that actually accentuate a slowness to addressing these and bringing those to mind. I believe Mercury goes direct within the next few hours of this reading in terms of the time of 10:40. and beyond in terms of hours. It does go direct within the same day, and that allows for the clearing of this square in order to bring forward and address primarily your friends, as well as an ability to transform relationships that have been structurally ingrained into what you may consider your most immediate environments, your cities, as well as your neighborhood. Okay. And it's important to also look to siblings if they're going through transformation or change in some sort of way. It has to do with the ability to look to these brothers or sisterhoods and find a sense of fortune in it all. Now, when it comes to the antithesis of Mars, which is Venus, Venus is currently in the middle of a conjunction that is formed between Sun and Mercury, a slight conjunction about, I would say, 10 or 11 degrees, which is fairly loose. So the fog of the mind essentially clears up, and what emerges is this Venus in Libra energy within the 10th and the 11th houses. Okay. That means that essentially the externalization of what we seek out in terms of relationships or creativity are solidified and balanced out. There is a harmony that actually comes about and a friendliness that emerges within the month of October, granting that opposing your ruler in terms of Mars and Venus polarity, a great number of things can occur on collective ambitions or goals, or the addressing of karma as well as business, in order so that those modes of ecological or economic concern may be pushed forward and address a sense of self and balance within the self, as well as purification within the self, good health and good mind. Psychologically, this pushes forward the agenda of addressing your own inner world in terms of the fourth house, how these senses of home, or perhaps the faith that is placed within home, or the spirituality that is within home, how it may have been feeling that this inner world, or this inner ashram, the temple of your body, has been going under duress in terms of the auspices of Jupiter and Neptune in retrograde. By the way, there are about 8 planets or 8 celestial bodies in retrograde, including Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and the more main planets, Saturn, Jupiter, the 2 benefics of the sky, or the two gurus of the sky, as well as Mercury in retrograde. And this changes over time, but because the teachers are essentially late to the game, that is Jupiter and Saturn, there is difficulty in actually producing the effects that we need in terms of our own learning, our own understanding, and our own capability being blessed by the wise and the older sages of the zodiac. Now, when it comes to the action and the karmas that are being addressed through the energy of Scorpio in Mars, in Gemini, in the 8th house, what I see here is an ability to pull from your neighborhoods, your friends, as well as your nearest siblings, lessons that have to do with the bringing forward of structures and multiple ways of existing in multiverse or timeline crossovers that allow for the ability to essentially bring forward and have faith in these people, these connections that are designed to I would say mutually reflect a vibration. There's something of I would say an overlap, or perhaps a resonant harmonic that may occur in terms of your more immediate and relevant relationships, or your brotherhoods or sisterhoods, in terms of Saturn, okay, which is in retrograde in Aquarius, which actually points to humanitarian designs or systems that are trying to be put about in terms of technological innovation, or perhaps something on a more humanitarian, collectivized, psychological or spiritual progression. And in this timeline, there is essentially something that allows you to go through the transformation in terms of your own ability to choose one pillar from the next. Okay, now every structure requires at least 2 pillars in order for them to sustain themselves in terms of time and duration. And with this, the pillars of Gemini essentially can be laid off into the horizon in terms of the mutual sustainability that occurs through the distortion of those pillars that are set down on the ground and are placed in Aquarian fashion. Okay, so this allows for a great number of things. Basically, it allows for a collapse, but as well from the rubble, from the ashes, comes a transformation. And therein lies the sort of collective idea of the third house placement of Saturn in retrograde in Aquarius. Okay. Now, the co-ruler of Scorpio is Pluto in a more modernist sense, and it is in retrograde in the third house. Okay. I see nothing but good for this. There's something about isolation when it comes to the ability to deal with more karmic influence of Capricorn, which has its vices, its grips in the third house, conjunct Pars Fortune at 24.36 degrees of Capricorn. Okay. This points to a lot of auspicious things in terms of your own ability to address karmas on a collective level, especially when it comes to relationships or the latency of mind. Something about the subconscious or the neurological complex of Scorpio in terms of their brain chemistry is actually being altered in some sort of way, perhaps even bipolarized in some sort of way in order to bring forward great systemic change, the ability to also address the sense of home, or if you're moving, there's something about the sense of home that actually may be within relocation, because in some circles the 10th as well as the 11th houses have to do with travel and addressing on a more global way, an ability to sort of become a home, have a home in the sense of the world, in terms of anywhere in the world, not just one distinct city or one distinct locale. With this, there's an ability to address one's goals or ambitions, as well as address one's business in terms of karmic transactions with others on a collective scale, and actually define and come up with a voice or a methodology that is through the energy of Gemini and the third house. Okay, so all these are very auspicious things. I am wishing you well. Now, lastly, in terms of relationships, in terms of all that, there's a lot that has to do with the dragon's head, leading others into instability, unstable relationships, or dealing with others outside of oneself. That has to do with this need for, I would say, sustainability, or a need to keep promises, but then these being, sort of, kind of weak in some sort of way. The bull of Taurus is actually in a rampant sort of stampede. The bull is stampeding, not in an economical sense, but more like in the sense that drive or ambition can address something in the disorder, and unfortunately this is disorderly conduct. So a lot of the contracts that you may be dealing with have to be double checked in terms of the terms or terms of endearment, as well as the terms of commitment, and how certain things may be committed to in the wrong projects or the wrong ideals. And these are all things that Scorpio should be aware of. I do wish you well. Thank you. I'm sorry for the additional noise, but that's all I can give you for now. Wishing you well, and thank you.